This is the Panasonic GH5S. Looks a little familiar? Well, it's similar to the GH5, its sibling camera that was introduced here at CES last year. The GH5S is using a 10.2 megapixel sensor, but because of that, the pixel sizes are actually much larger, which means it can absorb more light. This thing is a low light powerhouse. You can push the ISO up high enough that you can see in the dark, but yet you have a really clean picture with very little noise.
So our sensor is physically larger now than the GH5 sensor, which helps us to get larger diodes still. The byproduct of this is that we can't do in-body stabilization anymore.
Now, if you're an existing GH5 user or even a GH4 user, this will probably feel really natural to you. It's compared to GH5, it's almost exactly the same, minus the guts that we just talked about. Ergonomics, it feels exactly the same, has a really nice hold, and because of the Micro Four Thirds, it's a smaller body, so it's a really comfortable, lightweight camera.
I think something that gets lost on the average user is how much better the highlights look on the GH5S over the GH5, and really just about anything that's not a production cinema camera. We have 2 stops more latitude than the GH5, and that means that when we run into that point where we have to start clipping highlights, we can have a much smoother roll-off, so it has a much more filmic look. It has our dual native ISO function, which means it's an all-light camera, not just a low-light camera. So, some cameras, when you shoot in their log profiles, the lowest ISO you can go to is 1600, and there's nothing below that. This camera can go to a 320 ISO, and then it has a native 2500 ISO along with this native 400, which means that's where you get to that 51,000 and eventually 200,000 figure. Vlog, which is normally $100 to unlock in the GH5, is included with the cost of this camera. And then one of my favorite hidden features, especially for people who are maybe VR shooters or who are doing audio sync separate from their video, if you remove this little port here, what you'll have in its place is a cord that we can plug right in here, and it gives us a BNC connector at the end. I can then tie that into a timecode generator.
The GH5S is not going to replace the GH5. Both cameras are still going to be in the lineup. They're great cameras for different types of users. This guy is going to cost around $2,500. It's about $500 more than the regular GH5, and it will go on sale sometime in February.